This is Sarah Leslie with Go All In, helping entrepreneurs live the life they want to live right now, making the money they want to make the way they want to make it, while also living a rich and full life outside of their business. True personal freedom. Let's go. Hi, everybody. I am so glad to be here, and I'm so glad that you are too. It's been such a great 2 weeks. I took a week off of the podcast and took a week off just to enjoy life, right? To do the thing I used to refer to as vacation. And now I just think about it like I'm just spending time doing other things and not doing work, right? It's just a new way for me to be living so that my time has even more freedom than it used to have. And so it was my birthday. I turned 47, and then we had July 4th. And so that week for me is just always a week that I do more time with fun and adventure. And in other words, right, vacation, time off. And I hope your week was equally as beautiful as mine. We spent a lot of time here locally in Asheville playing tourist to a degree, but then also really actually practicing rest and relaxation. For the first time, I feel like in many, many years, love my home, have picked out every single thing in the house myself, with Troy, with great intention to be able to enjoy every part of our house and to feel very much at home. So certainly I've enjoyed other homes that I've lived in, and this is the first time it's ever felt like this, and the first time we've ever literally picked out every single thing in the house and brought it in and curated the space to like really enjoy it. So spending the time here was really a unique experience and extra delicious, shall we say. We just recently furnished the patio, and so we spent a lot of time sitting outside in the mornings. I love to drink tea in the morning and just soak it in. So it was a beautiful week, and I hope your week was equally as beautiful. So let's dive right into our topic today. I feel a little torn between what to call this particular episode because it's going to be about personal responsibility ultimately, and my sort of take on personal responsibility and the way that I like to talk about it. And the next couple podcasts will be something along that same line as well, breaking it down even more clearly from a couple of different vantage points. And I like to think about it as it's the most powerful stance you can hold. Like the most powerful way that you can go through life is through the approach of personal responsibility. And if that's a new term to you, you're totally in good hands. I'm going to explain it. And I incorporate it actually into all my stuff because, again, the approach that we go through life affects the entire way that you think about things, your entire foundation. And certainly that is true for me. The other thing that I would have called this, and maybe we'll post this as a separate podcast, the title of How to Stop Using the Past Against Yourself, right? The solution to stop using the past against yourself is assuming powerful person. We'll see what I end up putting down as the title, that would most be best appropriate for this and speak to the majority of the people who will be looking at my podcast. So getting us going, right? It is this powerful stance. And I don't know about you, but I am always looking for how to feel the most capable, the most competent, the most empowered way to go through my life. And that has been quite a journey to discover. And it's been years in the making and understanding of what does it look like for me to really feel empowered, right? That's a word that has been used quite a bit, at least in my world. And at certain points, I feel like it just sort of lost its meaning. It was just like a word we said. And so I've been reclaiming the power in the word empowered lately. And, using it interchangeably, of course, with powerful. Because again, I think if you're anything like me, which you probably have, some parts of you are like me since you're watching this podcast, we want to feel powerful. We want to feel in charge of our lives, in charge of our worlds, in charge of our outcomes, especially because so many of us grew up with a complete opposite understanding, really, that we were lacking control, that we didn't have as much power as we wanted, that we oftentimes were left feeling powerless. And so it's a shift to be able to really embody feeling powerful that doesn't also include control, right? Or fear, or those places of us that are being motivated through the desire to have more control over our lives. And so it's a very significant distinction between that restricted feeling of control to being powerfully in charge of one's life. So we're going to break it down here today, this morning, defining personal responsibility, taking a deeper dive into what does that really mean? I don't know about you, but when I first started into more of the specific world of personal development and personal growth, I started hearing this term personal responsibility quite a bit and was like, what does it actually mean? Like, it sounds good. I know I would resonate with it. And also, what the heck are you talking about? So we're going to really define that. Again, if I'm coming to it with 20 years as a therapist and I still felt like vague and unclear, I just assume most people need that deeper understanding of it. So I'm going to help you break that down a little bit. And then also look at if this is a way of living, then what are the ways of living that we've been using, maybe consciously, probably mostly unconsciously, and how are they then different from personal responsibility? And then also looking at why this is so important. And the way that I think about why this is so important is because I don't want to live as a result of my past, right? So again, this is getting to how to stop using the past against yourself, and or also how to not have the past define your future, or how to have the past not hold you back. Okay, so we're going to get into that a little bit as well. So defining personal responsibility, I would say the way that I most think about this now, and stay with me because even the way I think about it now is still kind of jargony and like not as common of a language, I think, for most people. But I think about it in a simple way that is cause and effect. And you are the cause in your life, okay? In your world, you are the cause, and the things happening around you in your world, some might say the results happening in your world, are the effect of you. Okay, so let's break that down also, right? So it's a different way of looking at the world, meaning most of us grew up, myself included, seeing different events happening, being in different experiences in my own life, watching other people go through experiences in their own life, as well as watching world events happening around me in the grand picture of my life, right? And thinking that those experiences then defined who I was and how I then acted, okay? The ways that I thought. So just even thinking about my own childhood, right? And so many experiences I could draw on. For me, one of the most significant is growing up in the church and the effect that my growing up in the church had on me, okay? And so for many, many years, there were things about me and who I was and the way that I was living that I would blame the church and the way that I was being taught in those years, that I would blame on the church, okay? And the things that I had learned and the things that I was told, this is the way, this is what's right, this is what's good, and you have to be this way, for instance. I don't want to get too lost in this particular example. So It's just this awareness of blaming the world or seeing my life experiences, right? So growing up in church and being told, that you have to, I don't know, let's just say go to church on Sundays, right? That you have to go to church on Sundays. And like some mornings I just didn't want to go, right? And so instead of it just being like a simple, like you just don't go, or you decide to go anyway because you usually enjoy it once you get there, or you like the outcome ultimately of going, you have a good time with people, you learn something new, and you really want that. And so you go anyway. But also being able to totally have the freedom, like you feel sick and you just decide to stay home. Instead of feeling that way or living that way, right, which is how I now see personal responsibility, it would be more like I would be so like conflicted about, oh, I really don't feel good, but I also know it's like the right thing to do and I should be going to church. And so then I would get lost in that self-judgment and allowing for the outside world to influence me at such an extent that I would go to church even when I felt sick, right? And I would go with a certain degree of resentment and frustration, right? Which is, of course, not at all in an energy that's useful. So again, it's really looking at I'm the cause, and the reason that I would then go to church feeling sick, right, was to avoid feeling bad about myself because it's what I believed was the best thing or the right thing. And that if I didn't go, I would somehow suffer some sort of consequence that I wanted to avoid. So it's choosing to be responsible for myself and my outcomes, regardless of the world around me, right? So instead of blaming my parents for making me go to church, which is the old way of thinking, I would blame them, I would blame the church, I would blame the outside world for making me feel like I had to go, right? Versus being able to just make a decision for myself that said, you know what? I really don't feel well this morning. I'm going to stay home and not a problem. So this happens as adults, right? In our jobs, in our relationships, where we want to blame the outside world. Like, oh, my husband, he doesn't pick up the clothes. He's, so difficult to live with. Or, oh, my boss is so difficult and makes my work environment so hard to be in, right? We want to blame the outside world. Now, I'm not saying you go around and blame, right, out loud. It usually happens more in the head on a regular basis. And then sometimes it happens where we're venting, right? But it's this concept of awareness that we're seeing other people as responsible for what we are or aren't doing. Or we see them as being the reason why we decide what we do or don't do. Does that make sense? So again, when we shift away from making decisions based on what we think we should and shouldn't do, right, from the programs and the rules that we have picked up from the outside world, then what's left? You're responsible, right? So it's really putting that ownership back on yourself for choosing what you're doing and what you're not doing with only you to be responsible. So it's not even to say that you're going to be blaming yourself, because I'm also not saying that. And that's another way that people misinterpret personal responsibility as they shift to, well, it's none of their faults, right? Especially when you're an entrepreneur and you're realizing like, whoa, I'm the boss and everything does come back to me and I can't actually blame other people. You still find a way to blame other people, right? When you hire employees, I just heard this the other day from a friend who says, he couldn't trust any of the people the 40 people that were working for him. And it's like, oh, so even as the entrepreneur, when you're solely in charge and you're aware that you're responsible, we still find a way to blame other people, right? It becomes the government, it becomes other people in the world and just other avenues. So again, when you learn and you live with personal responsibility as the approach to life, you just literally shift away from blaming, period. So you're not blaming other people and you're also, not blaming yourself. And this is a radical shift because when we shift to blaming ourselves and we practice what we think is personal responsibility and we say, I only have myself to blame, well, we're still in judgment of ourselves. So it's still a harsh way of going through life versus simply seeing yourself as the cause for the results you're having in your life without judgment. Okay? So it's really just more of this is how I'm being in the world. And because I am being this way and I'm doing these things, this is now the outcome. These are now the results from the way that I have been being and doing. Does that make sense? So it's no longer anyone's fault. There's no longer anyone to blame. It's simply a way of going through the world where you recognize I hold the power for how I choose to view my life, my circumstances, and the person responsible for these results in my life. It no longer leaves it up to something ambiguous to be in charge or responsible or potentially keeping you from the things that you want. Which again, I have come to believe and experience in my own life as the most powerful way to be living and not hold you back based on what is happening in your world currently or what has happened to you in the past. So the way in which this is different, right? I've already alluded to clearly, the main way that this is different is most of the time, I'll just say there are lots of other schools of thought out there that teach when you have a life experience happen to you, it then shapes who you are going to be from there forward. Okay. And certainly when I was a therapist for 20 years, it was like, that was a huge part of the work I was helping people with is to better understand their traumas and their life experiences that then go on to define who they are. The shift here for me today is this awareness that we don't want to look at it like the trauma, the life experience is now defining who you are. The trauma, right? Because the trauma then becomes the cause and the rest of your life experiences become the effect. So you're at the quote unquote mercy of your life experiences, which is incredibly disempowering. And it leads us into various things, substance abuse. I was in substance abuse treatment for about 10 years and mental health treatment. And it very much felt like a substance abuse disorder or a mental health diagnosis became the cause for why people were behaving the way that they were. And it also began to then determine their futures. And we would go back to the root cause being the mental health diagnosis or the substance abuse disorder, right? Oh, this person has this now disease. And this now means this is their future. This is how their life is going to play out to some degree or another, right? That it was now a result of this cause that the things going forward were going to play out or have an effect on them. Versus, which does leave a person in the position of being powerless to the disease, okay? And this can be applicable to like so many things in the world, right? So many things. So if you think about it as genetics, right? If genetics are true and we say, my parent was an alcoholic or my parent was a workaholic, and therefore the genetics now are determining that I too at risk or in likelihood to become an alcoholic or a workaholic. And we can then blame, right, or assign the cause to the genetics. And then it comes like the effects of our life come from that experience or that now belief. That now is the determining factor of what now happens in my life moving forward. And there's always this thing in the background pulling at you to say, oh, this might be your path. Like if you make this decision because you have this as a cause, you might become an alcoholic. for instance. So it leaves a person in a lesser state of power than I believe is possible for us and useful. And certainly, I want to live with the most amount of power that I can. So instead of seeing my genetics or my life traumas or my parents' way of being or any of the things that I've been a part of over the years as the cause for who I am now, my belief and my desire and my alignment is with this other theory, this other approach to living, which is I am the cause. And all of the things that come afterwards are the effect of what I have decided, what I am thinking, what I am believing is possible for me and for my life. Which leads me to that final point that I have for you, which is your future is not determined by your past unless you choose for it to be. So if you have life experiences, genetics, familial experiences over lifetimes that have happened to you or have been a part of your experience, the only way that those are now going to determine your future and the effects that you go through in your life is if you decide to allow that to be your path, your story, your narrative, your outcome. That's the only way that your past determines your future. And or you could also say the way in which your past gets used against you, holds you back, slows you down. Now, another thing I heard this week from a friend, just a person that I was in conversation with, who's an entrepreneur, a business owner, right? And again, I've heard this sentiment like 100 times for sure in the last year. Something to the effect of being a business owner is really hard. Or being an entrepreneur is really hard and all-consuming, right? Not a positive thing. Said with a negative tone to it for sure. If you continue to believe that sentiment, right, and you hold that because that's something that you were taught, it's something that you've seen modeled to you for many years, and you now believe it as a truth, then yes, everything that comes after that in your life, here now as the person who's in charge of yourself, will be a result of that core thought, of that fact that you're believing. Okay? So again, you hold the power to shift that simply by changing what you believe. So the thought, being an entrepreneur is all consuming or is hard, is easily changed by simply choosing a different story, by simply believing something different than that. And here's the reality, right? There are a lot of people in the world who are entrepreneurs and business owners who don't think that way, believe it or not. Now, you may not know them, and that's okay. It doesn't mean they don't exist, and it doesn't mean this isn't true. It just means that you don't know them. And here's why you don't know them, because essentially, I heard this in a training a couple years ago, birds of a feather flock together. Another way of hearing that is states of consciousness, states of awareness come into alignment with each other, right? We seek each other out. We're connected. We're drawn to each other based on what we are thinking, based on what our awareness of life is. We want to be around people who think somewhat similarly to ourselves. And we're consciously looking for people in the world who think similarly to ourselves or how we wish we thought about things. That's just happening completely unconsciously. You're probably thinking it a little bit consciously, but also your unconscious thought, your unconscious desire it's just working naturally all the time to connect you with people where you feel more comfortable and more safe, which another way of saying is simply who think like you. Okay? So we're not generally going out looking to hang out with people who have radically different thoughts than us. That's just not a thing that happens. And I'm not saying you don't appreciate other people's opinions. That's not where I'm at. I'm talking about more at that base level, like that survival level, that part of us that's constantly looking for safety is always looking for people who think like we do. So, bigger picture, you will just come into contact with people who resonate in the same way of thinking that you do right now. But that doesn't mean there aren't people out there who think completely differently, whose lives are so much more easeful and enjoyable because they have a different way of seeing the world. That's all that's happening here, okay? And at the same token that I say that's all that's happening here, I also say it like this. That's all that's happening here. And I want you to hear it that way because that's how big and significant the gravity of this concept, this approach to living, is that it's everything. Okay? So if your state of awareness, your consciousness, your state of being, and how you see the world determines everything that comes out of you after that, it's huge. It's everything. Then what you want to constantly be assessing, right, is who is it I actually want to be? And what thoughts and beliefs do I need to hold to actually be and do those things that I truly desire? Which means you have to actually change who you are. You can't continue being this old self who thinks this one way, right? And when you start to shift, new people will literally start to come into your awareness, into your day-to-day engagements, because you are now learning how to think in a new way. So you'll start to meet people who think in the newer way, who think in ways that have been unseen to you up till now. So just even in this one example, right, you'll start to meet people who no longer allow their past to define their future. Whereas maybe right now or, up until now, you've mostly spent time around people who live and believe that their past determines who they are, right? And that because this happened to them, this is what's going on in their life. And this is why they won't ever get to do whatever it is they really want to be doing, right? And that goes for just like all the social issues that we struggle with, right? If somebody is poor, then the thought is it's going to be really hard for them to get rich. And that's just in many circles a fact. But also, it isn't actually a fact. It's just a belief set that people have all agreed to in your current reality. For many, many years, it was believed that women were not able to hold the same positions as men, that they weren't as smart, that they weren't as capable, that they shouldn't own land. I just saw a movie advertised, I can't remember the name of it, but where women weren't allowed to own land, where they weren't allowed to own their own bank accounts and have money. Just things now that we would look back on and be like, that is insane. Well, I think anybody who's listening to me would think that. Maybe not everybody in the world thinks that. I'm sure there are still people who resonate at a consciousness where they don't think women should own land or have access to their own money. However, that is simply to give an example of how things change. In the grand scheme of all of our social issues, the way that things ultimately change, the way that you ultimately make a difference being one, is by learning for yourself how to think differently. And so instead of going along with the old way, you become personally responsible for your own thoughts and opinions and the way you desire life to be. So that's how women shifted from not having those roles in life to now they do have those roles in life in a large majority of the world. Certainly not all of the world, right? We're still in the process as a global entity. We're still in the process of shifting the consciousness of the world. So the way that we shift the consciousness of the world is by you shifting your consciousness, by you shifting your awareness, by you shifting the way you are being. That's why this work is so important. Because if you don't really go in and look at the ways you've been operating and learn how to shift them, you will continue to operate as the old person, as the old self, even if you don't want to. You just will do it because that's how the mind operates, right? The neuroscience of the pathways in our brain, that's literally how we operate. If you haven't seen Inside Out 2 yet, please go see it because it gives such a beautiful visual understanding of how the mind operates and how it will not change unless it's given specific intention to change. All right, you guys. So we have talked about personal responsibility. You're the cause in your world, and the things happening around you are the effect of what you think and how you choose to see the world, what you make meaning of. It's different from how you've been living, from believing that your past defines who you are and you can't step out of that, or you can't be totally healed from it, or you can't radically change your life. And I'm here to tell you, you can. Your future is not determined by anything other than what you decide you want from life. And that is how personal responsibility can be true for you as well. It is where you find your greatest, most powerful posture to go through the world, is to embody this way of living, this understanding of life, this understanding of what your mind is capable of, how you are able to define your own destiny. Ooh, it's so amazing. Learning to live this way, learning this in a way that is easeful is really best done with help. And I love to offer this to you because, again, I was a therapist for 20 years and I obsessively studied my craft and was constantly looking for new information, new ways of living, new ways of helping my people. And until I found this work, there was something significantly lacking in my own skill sets for my own life and to be able to help the people I was working with to get radical changes in their life. They were making progress and feeling better, but they weren't making radical shifts to being able to enjoy their life and enjoy who they were until I got my own mentorship. And when I really started to delve and commit to working with a mentor, a coach, a person who could see inside of my own beliefs and thought systems to be able to change that and actually learn the skill sets to do it, my life didn't change as rapidly or as easily as I desired it to. So that is my offering to you, is to step out there in faith, step out there in trust, and hire someone to help you. Absolutely, along the way, listen to this podcast, listen to the podcast of other experts who are saying something similar to me. Pick up books that are life-changing material to reinforce this new way of thinking on personal responsibility, of the past doesn't determine your future, because you want to embrace yourself, ingratiate yourself into this knowledge and information, because it does take time to really reprogram the way you're now thinking into a new way of thinking. It doesn't happen overnight. As you may already know, I work with folks in one primary way. It's one-on-one coaching over the path of 6 months, where we really get in there, look at your life, create your life vision, hone your life vision, understand what are those current beliefs and pathways that are getting in your way. What are you attached to from the past that you need to be liberated from so that you can live the life that you desire every single day. I am also hosting a mastermind starting in August for coaches who want to learn the skill sets to creating consistent cash flow in their business. This is a completely non-traditional way of approaching sales and client creation, okay? So it's not about sale. It's not about systems and funnels and sales pages. This is about really getting to the heart of what holds people back from being able to make easeful, delightful sales and have conversations with others about what they're offering. So, we're really delving into the way that your mind looks at sales, the way your mind looks at money, and creating clients and freeing you from the things that are holding you back and helping you to become the new person who easily does sales. I have 3 spots left for this group. It's limited to 5 coaches, and it will be a very high touch, highly curated, bespoke experience for you. If you're interested, shoot me an email at sarahlesliecoaching@gmail.com or reach out to me over Facebook and I'll get you an application to be able to sign up for that program. All right, you guys, that's it for me. Thanks so much for being here. Don't forget to link and subscribe to my channel, and all the links that you need will be here in the show notes. Between now and when I see you next, go be extraordinary. Ready to hire your own personal one-to-one mentor to help you take your life and your business to the next level? Go to my website where you can sign up for a no charge, no pressure consultation where we can get to know each other better. I get to hear your vision. I'll help you understand exactly what's getting in your way. And if it feels like a good fit and I believe I can help you, we'll talk about what it looks like to work together.